From architecture to painting and sculpture, literature to live music and theater. Radio 111 presents Bonnie G and Brayan Mendoza with The Desert Scene, your connection to culture and entertainment in the desert cities. Here's Bonnie and Brayan.
Now we get to talk about the Academy Awards. Now, you know what I like about, like I mentioned this on Flicks and Picks, we have the benefit of doing a whole week later and having that benefit of hindsight and all the news.
People have thought about it and settled in and made their decisions and that kind of stuff.
Now, I don't know if anyone's listened to Flicks and Picks, but I wanted to start with you, Bonnie. Give us, what do you want to talk about when it comes to the Academy Awards?
Well, I mean, there were some other really great things. In fact, you know, the deaf actor who won was the best supporting. Was that best supporting?
Yes.
And the women, there were 3 women comedian hosts, and there were, you know, a lot of things. But of course, you know, the elephant in the room is the whole Will Smith thing. And here's my feeling, and the other people have said the same thing. Both Chris Rock and Will Smith were out of line. Chris Rock was out of line to begin with. Number one. Now, of course, you always know Chris Rock is going to rock the boat and push the envelope. We know that. That's part of his humor. We get that. But he seems to have a little bit of an obsession with Jada Pinkett Smith and Will Smith, and he slammed them before in previous I don't know if it was the Oscars, and said she would.
It was in 2016 about...
Jada was boycotting it. I forget why she was boycotting it. Why was she boycotting it?
She was boycotting it because... in
not enough people of color?
Yeah, and it was like one of those years where all the nominees were white, but they were also not very good nominees. Yeah. And so the black actors just happened to star in better movies like Straight Outta Compton. Mm-hmm. So the idea was... you don't nominate actors of color, but then if you think about it, the white actors they chose weren't
that great anyway.
Were not that great that year anyway, so there's no reason.
So he made a joke, something like, you know, I'm even going to repeat the joke, but basically said she wasn't invited. So, you know, why, you weren't invited. So he apparently has, and I guess his decided targeted them for some reason in the past. I don't know why. But the joke that he made about her hair, I mean, she has alopecia, so she has a medical condition that causes her hair to fall out, which is why I think she looks great. I mean, not everybody looks good bald. She looks good bald. But that was out of line. It was not funny, and it was unnecessary. And I certainly understand, of course, Jada Pinkett Smith was glad. Now, the interesting thing was, though, and you probably noticed this, when the camera was on them, when he said that, she looked mad. Will Smith was laughing. In the beginning, he was laughing, and then the camera went to Chris, and then something must have happened there. Where Jada looked at him and said, "What the hell?" Whatever, and then he gets up on stage and slaps him. What I think should have happened is, I understand Will Smith being outraged and protecting his wife. One, he could have just stayed in his seat and yelled out what he yelled out and keep my wife's name out of your mouth, or just glared at him. Or even if you feel you have to go up on stage, if he'd gone up on stage and taken the mic and said, "You are out of line. That was not funny. My wife has alopecia, whatever. I think you owe her an apology." Everyone in that audience would have cheered Will Smith on and said, "You're right. Chris Rock does owe her an apology." And that would have made Will Smith look like pretty much the classy guy, and Chris Rock looked like an idiot. But to go up there and slap him and physically assault him, no. And I'm glad. I know he's resigned from the Academy, which I think it was a smart thing to do. And now this whole controversy that the Academy's claiming they asked him to leave and he's refused, and he's saying that's not true. And I mean, and then they're saying, well, Chris Rock's people said they want. I mean, there's all these conflicting stories now. So what's your take, Brian?
My take is that with Flicks and Picks, I try to be very democratic in how I view it, because my heart, first of all, goes off to all 3 of them, because Chris Rock, like you said, has a very special interest in Jada Pinkett Smith. Like, I feel like if you are a comedian, you have every right to make whatever joke you have, but it does not mean that the audience has any right to laugh or to
find it
funny or to do anything about it. And it's not the death of comedy. This is not the death of comedy. If you are I've seen too many comedians on my feed. First of all, if you're funny, you're funny. But it is not the death of comedy just because this happened, because Chris Rock made a joke and he did suffer the consequences for it. And I don't know if the consequences necessarily should have happened the way they did, but I also want to take in the fact that I think Chris Rock wants to move on from it, because there was a comedy show recently that he did where somebody had heckled Will Smith and he actually shut it down. I think he wants to move on from it, and he didn't press charges, which that says a lot about Chris Rock. I think Chris Rock saw it as a learning moment, and he was like, you know what, you're right. And he also had done a documentary about alopecia, so it's one of those things where he probably regrets the joke, and so it is one of those moments where I think the learning moment for him is not necessarily probably the slap, but I think the learning moment was that alopecia does affect black women, and that maybe even if he knows a black woman, and Jada Pinkett has admitted that, you know, sometimes all she can do is laugh to herself. It doesn't mean that you get
the choice to do that, right? Exactly.
And so when Will Smith had a moment where, like, I know Will Smith and Jada Pinkett have had
their ups and downs,
but I also feel like a lot of the hostility towards Jada, because I've seen too many people attack her, tends to be people who don't understand open marriages, and that they're because if their marriage is open, and they've always had a very non-traditional relationship, even in the 90s, Will Smith had said Jada's never been like the marrying type or the traditional marriage type. So whatever marriage we would have would be untraditional. I feel like a lot of people attack her for it and say, and I feel like that's a little unfair, because I think their marriage is complicated, but it's their thing.
It's nobody else's business, really. Yeah. It's not.
And it's not, I don't think it's fair to speculate on it, because I feel like marriages have things that they keep to themselves. And the other thing I would say about Jada Pinkett is that she had a hard year last year, along with alopecia and also Will Smith having depression and gaining weight and then losing weight. The COVID-19 pandemic really had affected them mentally. So they had a lot of things where people were making fun of them because of that one interview, and people making fun of Will Smith's weight, and people sort of making fun of just Jada for everything. And another thing that happened was, like, Jada Pinkett's one movie from last year, The Matrix Resurrections, failed at the box office. And Will Smith had some success with King Richard, which, again, didn't do so well at the box office because HBO actually screwed over both movies. But it got nominated, so that's, like, a good thing. But I thought it was actually one of those things where I got the impression that it was the one positive night that they had to look forward to from last year, where it's like, you know what? That was the one good thing from 2021. Will got nominated. Let's go and have a good time. And I think it was made into a situation where the joke reminded them of all these things that happened in 2021. And so I think it triggered something in Will Smith. And also just the fact that, like, Will Smith was always made fun of for being soft and a pushover. So there's a lot of factors in there that led to that moment. And I have sympathy for Will Smith, because it's sort of like, I understand the societal need to prove, quote unquote, your manhood, but I don't think it was the right decision in the end. At first I was like, go Will Smith, go prove it. But then I thought, no, because it took away from a lot of things.
It was not the place for it.
No. And if it was going to happen, it should have happened
afterwards, at the party or in the parking lot or whatever, but not on stage at the Oscars.
And also, because to me, like, again, the sad thing is that anytime a man of color does something, everyone thinks it reflects badly on the community. And it's sad because we live in a world where, like, people define a whole group of people by that one action.
Which is absurd, but people do it. It's absurd, but people still do it. So, somebody said, and I forget who it was who said this. There've been some great responses. Oh, maybe it was it Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?
Yeah.
And he might have said that, unfortunately, it plays into these stereotypes some people have that, well, African-American men can't control their tempers and are always violent, which is not true. But for some people, they can say, see, that, you know, and which is not true. But it's just unfortunate that he chose to do that. And
it's sad because this is going to turn Will Smith, because you know how I mentioned earlier, he was often laughed at as being a pushover or a softie, because when he did rap music, his music was very different from other rappers. And so it was laughed at. Now he's being played up as, like, a dangerous, unstable man, which is unfair, because there was an incident that happened a couple years ago at the Academy Awards where a man tried to assault him at the red carpet. There was this man who sprayed water at at Tom Cruise. And then the same man went to the Academy Awards red carpet and tried to grab Will Smith on the face to kiss him, and Will Smith pushed him back. And everyone is framing that incident as assault from Will Smith. But the fact is that the man
grabbed him,
forcibly tried to kiss him, which, by the way, people watch too many comedies if they don't think that kissing someone by force is a bad thing, because that is that is assault.
Of course it is.
And so if someone tried to do that to me, I would push them away.
Yeah.
And I would hope. And the sad thing is, in that situation, it was made worse because it was a white man doing it to him. So now it's like we have a big, scary black man pushing someone else.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a really unfortunate situation for Will Smith, Jada, and Chris Rock.
It's unfortunate for everybody, yeah.
And I hope it's a learning moment for all three of them in some way or another. And I would like for them to heal, because, you know what? Will Smith worked his butt off to get that Academy Award.
Yeah, and that's what's really sad. It's here he finally wins an Oscar, and it's the whole thing is just stained by this incident. The other thing that somebody mentioned, and I agree with this, is you wonder, because there's always copycat people. And if I were a stand-up comedian, they're saying, like, the next time I go to a comedy show and someone doesn't like what I say, some guy's going to storm the stage and start punching me out. I mean, there's people that think that way. You know, that security didn't stop Will Smith at the Oscars, and they didn't drag him out. So, well, I can just go up on stage and do anything I want. So that's disturbing.
Now, I wonder how the Academy. I've heard some things, speculation, where people were wondering: is there going to be like a barrier? Is there going to be a barrier?
Are they going to change things now, or maybe just have two guards stand at the stairs up onto the stage, and if someone's not supposed to be going up there to win an award, they ain't getting up there. You know.
And I do want to have some pushback on a take where everyone called it the ugliest moment in Oscar history.
It's not.
It's not, because you know what? For me, the ugliest moment is Roman Polanski winning Best Director, and everyone knew what he did, and he wasn't even allowed to come to the country to get his Oscar because he would have been arrested. Him winning that was a real scary moment to me. And to me, if you don't see why that's scary, you need to, in my opinion, you need to evaluate what is scary.
Right.
And also, people forget that literally 50 years ago, a movie called The Godfather came out, and Marlon Brando did not accept the Academy Award for Best Actor. And he brought up a very brave, very beautiful woman named Sasheen,
Indian woman,
Native American woman named Sasheen Littlefeather to decline the Oscar, and she went up there to do her speech, and not only did Clint Eastwood make fun of her, but what's her name? Another actress, I forget her name. She's irrelevant now. She made fun of her too, but everyone forgets that John Wayne wanted to storm the stage and had to be held back by 7 guards because he wanted to beat up this young Native American woman just for addressing the unfair, like, white privilege that is Hollywood. Or she basically said that Hollywood was treating Native Americans wrong, and that because of Wounded Knee, and Marlon Brando wanted to prove a point that you can't do this, and so he sent someone on his behalf. But also, I think he did the right thing by getting someone from that community to speak out. So to me, that is an ugly moment. That is an uglier moment because that was a moment of racism and just a moment of, like, someone trying to do the right thing and getting something that they did not deserve, and almost getting attacked.
So there've been a number of ugly moments. It'll just be interesting to see. Well, first of all, it's going to be interesting to see what other, if any, repercussions from the Academy. I mean, Will Smith's already resigned. They're not going to take his Oscar away. But if there's any, I mean, he's already resigned, so I'm not quite sure what else they can do except not allow any of his movies to be nominated. I don't know. But to see if they're going to change any of the procedures at the actual ceremony.
I also want to make clear that resignation means that, for our listeners, that resignation means that he can't attend Academy screenings. So, like, let's say if he was to see a movie nominated, he would have to go to the theaters like everyone else. He can't vote, but he can be nominated, and he can attend the yearly telecast, I believe, even if he's not nominated because he won. So he can still attend. I just think that he needs to attend only if he's nominated, just to save face.
Well, one thing I here's one thing I would say, and I think this would be, maybe satisfy both sides. Traditionally, next year, he would give out the award for, I think it's Best Actress. They switched genders. I don't think they should let him do it. I don't think they should let him do it. I think that would be appropriate.
Even if I have mixed feelings about it, I don't think they'll do it. I think that they'll make the decision of maybe getting like Benedict Cumberbatch or Andrew Garfield. I think what they need to do is get the other nominees to do it. So sort of like
maybe have all 4 of the other male nominees give it next year.
Yeah.
And sort of make a point. You smack somebody at the Oscars, you're not going to get invited to give out an award the next year.
And so my mixed opinion is that I think it would be a good chance for it would depend on the rest of the year.
Yeah, see what happens.
Because my thing is, I would like to see how Chris Rock feels about it, because to me, the voice that, when it comes to like consequences, is Chris Rock. If Chris Rock needs to be consulted, like, hey, how do you feel about this? Because if he didn't press charges and Chris Rock wants to move on, I think it wouldn't hurt necessarily the Academy to invite Will Smith, but it has to be, in my opinion, it has to be something that happens throughout the whole year, where maybe like both of them heal together, and it could be like a healing moment where both of them could come on stage to give out the award.
Well, that in an ideal world that would be great. However, I think, and they've both apologized. They've both issued long written apologies, which is great. However, I think it's in a large degree 2 separate issues. The Academy has the right for their show to go a certain way. So the Academy has the right to say, no, you are not giving this award this year because you came into our show, which is a separate issue. Chris Rock doesn't have a say in that. I don't think. Of course. The Academy can decide that.
You're right. You're right. It's one of those things where the Academy has, even if you don't agree or agree with the decision, if the Academy were to do, like we said, the 4 other nominees,
that would be great.
Which I think would be fun, because then they could also, and if they want, they could also, for the other people, just so they don't say anything, maybe they can have the Best Actress with her fellow nominees from last year do that. If they wanted
just
to
switch it around the whole thing just to cover, But I think, for me, I think that is a privilege he should not have.
And I think personally, just to kind of give a healing moment, for now, I'll say, I'll wait for the rest. For me personally, I'll wait for the rest of the year to play out, see how it goes, because I would like to hope that the ideal version would be Chris Rock and Will Smith go on stage together and present that award. And, because I think that there's always going to be that, I feel like Chris Rock and Will Smith could ultimately find it in their hearts to find an amicable sort of agreement. I hope so, because they're both, decent guys in the end, and they're not terrible people that are doing anything. And you know what? Whatever is hurting Will Smith, whatever is hurting Jada, and whatever is hurting Chris, my heart goes out to them, because it is a rough time. And just the fact that a lot of great, and as I've mentioned on my show on Flicks and Picks, a lot of great first people, like Latina queer person to win an Oscar.
Which was great. And the deaf guy for Coda. Yeah, a lot of great things happened.
And Coda being the first all majority deaf cast movie to win Best Picture. And then Jane Campion, I had issues with something she said a couple weeks ago, but you know what? She's apologized, and Serena and Venus Williams have forgiven her, so I have very little to say, but she actually was the second woman in a row, for the first time, the second woman in a row to win Best Director.
Which is fabulous.
Because people don't realize how big that is, because every year we're used to 5 men in a row. Now it's 2 women in a row. So I'm like, can we get a third?
And can I just say one other thing? I was pretty happy this year, when I haven't for many years. I was pretty happy with the Best Song winner.
You know what?
I liked the Best Song winner.
Oh, No Time to Die by Billie Eilish. You know what? I'm glad you said that, because I was curious about your opinion.
I liked it. I didn't like, I can't remember all the rest of them, but there were a couple that I was like, really?
The one thing I was disappointed by was that when they did the Encanto music, the sad part is that they chose, in my opinion, a good song, but not a great song from that movie. And the most popular song from that movie, We Don't Talk About Bruno, they did a terrible remix of it. So if you've never heard that song outside of that, then you got a bad representation of it. And it wasn't even nominated. So They did that.
One other thing that several people put this on Facebook. I did not like the way they did the in memoriam thing.
Me neither.
I mean, I understand, that they were doing, but it's times as big production numbers. So for me, it looked disrespectful to the people who passed away.
I feel like they put too much
too much on the music and all. Shut up and let's read who it was. And, the music should be quiet and subdued, in my view.
In my opinion, it should be about the people,
not the music. Yeah, not this production number. Let's clap and all that stuff. No.
Especially considering that we did lose a lot of good actors.
Yeah, there were a lot of people.
And I do want to also add another thing I didn't like. I think in general, the ceremony itself was it was not good enough to survive the Will Smith incident. I do also think that the three hosts were disappointing.
They weren't that funny. I mean, I'm glad it was three women, but the writing, it was just not that funny.
It makes me sad because, anytime a male host shows up and he isn't funny, no one takes it as a thing against the gender. But I'm worried that because it's three women.
Oh, well, see, look what happened. There are three women. Well, look, who wrote it? Who wrote their jokes? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, that's true. And also, it's not even the worst Oscar moments of all time, because if we're talking about hosting, everybody forgets that a man wrote the Snow White Rob Lowe.
That was awful. That was awful.
So if you all want to come for three women, remember that a man wrote that really bad one.
Yeah.
I do want to say that I was not a big fan of how every year they disparage animated movies, because they always like to say, oh, they're for kids, or those movies are so annoying that these are the movies for the parents. When almost most of the movies that were nominated in the short animated section and then the movie section were not for kids. There was a documentary about a man fleeing his country.
Yeah, so there were more adult themes, yeah.
Yeah, and so for me, it was a little ridiculous to call it a kids genre. And I know it's more of a personal gripe for me, but it's a situation where I feel like we need to get hosts and people who are in touch with the awards that they're presenting. I am done hearing jokes about animated films.
Yeah. When
there are underpaid animated voice actors, underpaid artists, and people who are overworked, it doesn't look good anymore. And also, you know what? I just feel like the Oscars need to get themselves together, because last year was boring. This year was a disaster for a different reason. They need to get themselves together.
Get it together, Oscars. Come on.
They really did.
Yeah.
I think.
All right.
I think if anything, this is going to go down as one of the worst Oscars in history, and not just for Will Smith and Chris Rock, but for everything else.
Well, there were a few good winners, but other than that, yeah.
It's sad. This is a year where most people agree on the winners,
but the rest of the show,
disaster. Yeah. But you know what? That's another one for the books.
We'll cross our fingers for next year.
Cross our fingers for next year, for that ideal world that we'll finally get a good ceremony. We'll see you later on The Desert Scene.